Hey guys, so for this week I thought it would be a good idea to make a bit of a continuation of last week's video, and it's related to one of my old bad habits really. And yeah, I talked to you guys about how I would meticulously plan everything and how that wasn't really a good behaviour for me, even though I was keeping on track of everything. It's just not something that can fit well with society in general. And this next behaviour was one that it was going on for about a month or two, and this was again about a year and a half ago. And it was related to, not only was I like meticulously counting everything and writing it all down, but I would also save everything till the end of the day and consume basically the whole day's worth of food in like 3-4 hours. And I guess you can call it a binge eating, but I would make sure never to go over my daily allowance for that day. It was all highly controlled, and I, I, I vaguely remember the reason for me doing it, and it was fear of not being full. I think was my thing. I was constantly worried about if I have a meal, I might still feel hungry afterwards. So if I just basically eat as much as I can, then I know that I won't be hungry afterwards. So I won't be thinking about trying to get more food. And I think that was why I was trying to do it. And I mean, the obvious issue was that yeah, I was fine after an hour. I was fine after like 2 hours, but then after about 3 hours, I was really full, and it was like really interfering with my sleep because I'd do it all at the end of the day, and I'd be eating into like 1 or 2 in the morning. And so when I eventually get to bed, it was just really difficult to get to sleep with my stomach just basically having to like digest so much food. And then I had to deal with the next day, which was even worse because I'd have to not eat essentially for a whole day, and I do remember I was just replacing everything with calorie-free fluids like water and Diet Coke, those kind of things, and it was horrible. I hated it. I really hated it, and for some reason I just couldn't get out of it. It was just this fear of not being full that was just driving me forward, and I used to remember thinking to myself, I mean, if I can just move a bit of it to the middle of the day, then maybe I won't feel so bad throughout the whole day. But then the other part of me will be like, oh, but what happens if by moving that you won't be full at the end of the day? It was that kind of irrational thinking, and it would just take over your mind completely. But it was getting to the point where I knew that this couldn't go on, and one of the biggest turning points for me was basically realizing a purpose for myself. Yeah, I was in medical school and I was, going through the motions, going to lectures, doing my exams, but I didn't really feel like I was doing much for myself. There was nothing. The goal of medical school was so far away, and I didn't really have anything to do at that point. So I just kind of had to think about what I wanted to do now. And the obvious thing for me was getting ready for the USMLE. So I knew that in order to study effectively, I couldn't continue doing things like this. So, I mean, that was one of my primary motivators. The other motivators were obvious things, like my dad sometimes wanted to come up to Cambridge. And so, he would want to go out for a meal, but then that obviously wouldn't conform to me eating all of my calories at the end of the day because it would just be too much of a change for me to have to eat at say 6 p.m. rather than 10 p.m. And so it would just cause a massive shift in my day, and I knew that would cause me a great deal of anxiety if that were to happen. So yeah, I mean, there were so many motivations that I had to think about, and I do recommend that you think about these things because if you don't have a valid motivation to make a change, then you just never will because these irrational thoughts, like the ones I was having, would just constantly plague your mind, and you wouldn't appreciate their irrationality until you have a motivation to try and turn things around because then you start to think a bit more clearly. So I mean, the first thing that I decided to do was make small changes here and there. So I would move. I remember moving like 200 or 300 calories to the very beginning of the day for breakfast, And I mean, that was one of the first things that I did. And then once I was comfortable with that, I knew, because what I needed to prove to myself was that by doing this, I would still feel full at the end of the day, but also I could feel better throughout the day. And it was obviously going to happen, but it was very difficult for me to appreciate this at the very beginning. And then once I proved that to myself, I thought, okay, this is great. Now let's move to the next thing. So I moved a bit more to the middle of the day, so I could have a lunch. And I started off with a small lunch, obviously, because I didn't feel that I could move too much. So it was maybe, again, 400 calories. This is back when I was still actually controlling the number of calories that I was having. So yeah, I proved to myself after 2, 3 days that it was fine. But still, I mean, there was still that thing in the back of my mind that was saying, "Oh, but it's fine today. But what happens? It's something might be different tomorrow." And so I just continued with this plan for a bit, and then once I felt truly comfortable, I just tried to remember my old meal plans that I was on back in the day of coming out of the inpatient unit, and I knew that that was a healthy meal plan. So I tried to conform to that in a sense, where I tried to have a better lunch. I tried to move things so I could have snacks throughout the day, and eventually I got there. Within like maybe 3, 4 weeks, I got there, of finally getting back to a regular meal plan. It was a speed hump for me because it happened. It happened very suddenly, for about a month, and but by proving to myself that I could do it, I got out of it. And I know that many of you who are watching this have struggled with this in the past, and I mean, if you can try and find something that's comfortable for you, you can get out of it if you really do try. So, I mean that worked for me. If you have any ideas about things that are more personal to you, that you might want a bit more advice on, please do let me know, and I'll try and think of ways to help you, because I have actually had messages from people about this, and they have had more unique ways of trying to deal with that, and I have helped them along the way. So yeah, I'm happy to help in any way that I can. If you've got any suggestions, again, please leave it in the comments section below. And for now, thanks for watching.